Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to the Change Management Simplified podcast, where we will explain and discuss what change management is really about, using real examples alongside principles of change management based on our experiences on projects, transformations, change initiatives, and of course, the home experiences as well. In this episode, we will continue with the question we had previously in the previous episode, which is what is change management? We will continue to cover the basics of change management, but in this episode, we are using a normal life example, and this will be changing schools from primary school to a secondary school. So it's a personal normal life example, a change that most of us go through or will go through at some stage. And I want to use this to demonstrate that you are practicing or you do practice change management in your normal life, even though you don't actually realize you're doing it. So this is episode 3, but it's part 2 of the change management basics. We all know that changing schools, especially from primary to secondary school, which is a big jump in life at that stage, we know it can either be exciting, traumatizing, it makes us nervous, and it sometimes gives us sleepless nights, both for the parents but also the child as well, because they don't know yet what will be ahead of them. So even though they know they're going to a new school, they don't know how that experience will go. So, what are we saying here? And again, to the basics, what is change management? As I broke it down before, you need to break it down. What is the change? And then what is, and then what management needs to happen for you to be able to manage it successfully. In this particular scenario, as I said before, the change initiative is a young child moving from changing schools, and it could be from secondary school to university, or from high school to college for those in the US, or from secondary school, upper secondary school to university for those in Africa and other countries and in the UK. And for some people, it's just, it could just be changing from primary school to secondary school. In this particular scenario, I'll use a primary school to secondary school because that's something that we've just recently gone through with my family. But I only reflected on it as I was doing the previous episode. So the change initiative, one, you need to know what the change initiative, and in this case, is changing schools. The stakeholder that I'm going to focus on, because this is from two perspectives. The parent, and I'm chuckling as I'm saying that, the parent is also going through change. But the parent has to stay stronger and manage the change on behalf of the child. Then the child themselves is the stakeholder here that I'm going to focus on. How do we get them through this change? And how do we, or as parents or older relatives, how do we help them manage through the change to make sure they do the transition successful? So firstly, we need to know what is the actual change. And here is changing. Yes, we know it's changing schools, but what type of school is at what level? Changing from primary school to secondary school is a big transition. You need to take a step back. You've got a young girl, a young boy in their maybe between 10 to 13 or 11 to 13 making this transition. So going from a smaller building of a primary school where maybe they have 3 classes for each year to a very massive grand secondary school, which has got the upper schools, in some cases, the upper students, much older students, big, older, taller, and wiser, as they like to think they are. And then they are the ones, the newcomers into the school, and they're now at the bottom of the pile in terms of, where they're at in that stage of schooling. Why is the change happening? Why is the change required? We also have to explain to the child, why is this change required? Yes, because, we do have those phases of, why do I have to change, mom? I like my school. But in this case, there's no choice. It's not a choice about you staying in that school or changing to a new school. It's that cutoff point of where you have to move from primary school to secondary school, and they have to go to a new and bigger school. They have to understand that. So you have to talk to them about them. You have to explain to them what's happening and why it's happening. Thirdly, who is it going to impact? It's impacting your child. And this is why you have to invest time in understanding how this could impact them, but also the school they're going to. This is why the schools have open evenings. You go and visit the schools, take them with you. Let them see what the schools are. Help them contribute to the decision of the final school. Let them be aware of where they're going, but also seeing that grand scale from the smaller primary school they're in to the big school, just to help them visualize that transition. Sometimes it's scary, but you're gradually showing them what is coming in the few months after the summer holidays. And then what is the impact on the stakeholder? The impact is everything is changing. One, their friends, not all the time their friends end up in the same school, but also they could end up in the same school, but they could be in different classes. Two, they feel like it's just like any other human beings, but these are now kids. They're still babies to us anyways, but to them, not really. Making new friends is not easy. Integrating into a new environment is not easy at that age group. If it was during primary and the lower schools and nursery, they can easily integrate. But as you get older, I do feel personally, it takes you longer to integrate into a new school or into a new workplace. And what is the impact on them? Their self-esteem would usually go down. They'll lose a little bit of, confidence of it's a new surrounding, new teachers, new premises. Everything is new and grand to a huge scale. You have to go from one class to another to the different lessons. Unlike in primary school, especially in the UK, where you're in one class and your teacher comes in to teach from that one class for the different subject. So here, there's a little bit of time management for them. So they're starting to realize what life is going to be. Not as an adult yet, but gradually getting there. Then you have to know how this change is impacting this child. And this is where it's you as a parent, take a step back, or we take a step back, or we took a step back to try and understand how this is impacting this, how's it impacting the child or the stakeholder. I'm going to call them the stakeholder. How's it impacting them? And how do we navigate that? How do we get them comfortable with this change? We know we cannot do it perfectly and 100%, but how do we ease that transition? How do we ease their concerns, their worries of, I don't know anybody there, my friends are not going to the same school as me, oh, the school's far, I have to get on the bus, I have to get on the train, I have to walk a longer distance to get there. How do we get, you need to understand how that's impacting them. Forget you at the moment. Right now, you are working with this young child to be able to get to the school and settle in and have a productive, learning environment. Remember, this is a vulnerable age group whereby they've probably been with the same teacher at least for 2 to 3 years minimum through primary school, because they don't often change teachers. So it's important that you just continue to give them that assurance that, it won't be as bad as they think, and they will make new friends. So then how do you manage this transition to help them at least make that transition a little bit easier for them? First and foremost, communicate. Over communicate even, here I would strongly encourage that. But make sure you start this communication at least a few months before they have to make the change from the primary school to the secondary school. Make the discussion normal as part of the normal conversation. I do it while maybe we're cooking or baking, just randomly ask, how do you feel about moving to a new school? do you know where your friends are going? Because, the people that she's with or they're with, they're likely to go to different schools, and maybe one or two might end up in the same class or school as them. So help them manage that expectation that it's going to be new faces, and it is daunting for them to go through and make new friends. It's like another big mountain for them to climb. Be clear about what the expectation is. Talk to them about secondary school. What is the expectation? You have to go to different classrooms for each lesson. You don't have to stay in the same class anymore. The building's a bit bigger. You will find a lot more kids in the school. But just help them manage that transition. So when they at least get there, it's not too much of a shock. Go to the open evenings, the school open evenings, secondary school ones. That is definitely that's definitely a very, I would say, value-add activity, because they get to see the size of the school, but also the teachers talk to them. And as well, what the school does really best is get some of their students to do some of the tours of the class or the lessons, just to try and help them make them at ease. Now, I know this is also daunting at this stage for the parent, because when you go to these open evenings, I'll use that as an example, you realize that actually your child is now growing even bigger. They're not babies anymore, and they're turning teenagers, and they have to go to the secondary school or high school in some countries. You're also finding this change daunting. Regardless of how brave you might be, or putting on the face for, we do that, that's what we have to do. But I can understand that you're also struggling with the change, but I promise to talk about how you manage this change or this transition in the next episode as a parent, because this is where you come into play. Just to try and make the transition a lot smoother, to just make sure the journey is successful for your child. And then your next fourth item, the fourth item is how do you manage the transition? Now, this is different from the example that I used in the previous example. Here, I would most definitely encourage you to communicate a lot, clearly, precisely, and gently breaking it down. Do not assume they know what they don't know. So you'll start to hear them say, "Oh, I know," but not really. For me, communication to the young kids is never enough. So when they say, I know, I will still repeat it. And I'll give them the look of, you can tell me I know, but I'm going to repeat it to make sure that you know and you remember. And through this whole process of you, one, understanding the change or knowing the change initiative, which was changing schools from primary school to secondary school, as the actual change here, someone moving from secondary school to university might not be too bad, because they've done a number of transitions from school before they get to the latter stages of schooling. So that change might not be too bad or too difficult for them to adapt to. Why is the change required? Explain to them you're moving from one schooling stage group to another, and you have to go into a bigger school. Who is it going to impact? It's impacting them. You need to take yourself out of the picture. We can talk about you as a parent in a separate episode of how we can manage the change, because I do understand as your child is going through this transition, you're also going through a transition, a different phase of parenting, and understanding of how to manage this change for yourself as well. So I understand that as well. But here we're focusing on the child, who's the stakeholder. 3, who's it going to impact? It's impacting them. Yes, it's impacting you, but we will talk about you as a parent in a different episode. And then what is the impact on them? Their life is changing. They feel like some of them, their life is coming to an end because they're losing their friends. They have to go to new schools. They don't know anybody. If you find this podcast beneficial or interesting, please press follow, like, or subscribe. Lastly, and of course, don't forget to spread the word by sharing. Thank you for listening.